So, you get in your car, you turn the key, and there it is again. That high-pitched, ear-splitting squeal coming from under the hood. You know the one. It's got to be one of the most common, and definitely most annoying, car sounds out there. But what is it actually trying to tell you? Well, let's pop the hood together and start our investigation into the mystery of the startup squeal.
So, what is that awful noise really? Is it just some minor annoyance you can ignore? Or is it a warning sign of something much more serious brewing? We're going to break it all down piece by piece so you can finally understand exactly what your car is trying to say.
At its core, that squeal is just simple physics. It is the sound of friction, plain and simple. Think of it like a sneaker skidding across a polished gym floor. You've got a rubber belt that's supposed to be gripping a metal pulley, but instead it's slipping. That loss of grip is what creates that horrible high-pitched sound.
Okay, so to figure out why it's slipping, our investigation officially begins. And just like any good detective story, we have a prime suspect who's responsible for the vast majority of these cases.
And here it is, the serpentine belt. This long, winding rubber belt is the real workhorse of your engine bay. It kind of snakes around a bunch of pulleys to power all sorts of crucial components. And this is why it's so important. If this belt snaps, you instantly lose your power steering, your battery stops charging, and your engine can overheat in a hurry. Because it does so much, it is, by far, the #1 cause of startup squeals.
So let's look at the evidence, shall we? A healthy belt is going to be flexible and have a kind of matte finish. But a worn-out belt? Oh, that's a different story. It gets hard, it gets cracked, and it develops this shiny or glazed surface from all that slipping. So if you see cracks, any fraying, or, goodness forbid, signs of oil or coolant on it, you've almost certainly found your culprit.
You know, these belts don't last forever. A typical lifespan is right around 50,000 miles, but let's be honest, a lot of us push them way, way further. So if your car has, say, over 100,000 miles and it's still on the original belt, well, the odds are extremely high that it's worn out and needs to be replaced, even if it looks okay at a quick glance.
But what if the belt itself looks totally fine? Well, our main suspect doesn't always act alone. Sometimes it's pretty much forced to slip because of a failure in one of its accomplices. You know, the other parts it has to work with.
First up, we've got the belt tensioner. Its one and only job is to keep that serpentine belt nice and tight using a really powerful spring. But, you know, over time, that spring can get weak. And when it does, the belt gets loose, it loses its grip, and yep, it starts to squeal.
The other accomplices are the accessory pulleys themselves. See, each part the belt drives, like the alternator or the AC compressor, has a pulley with bearings inside. If one of those bearings wears out and just seizes up, the pulley stops spinning freely. And now, the belt is basically being dragged across a surface that won't move, causing a ridiculously loud squeal. Okay, here's a great clue you can listen for yourself. If that squeal gets way louder the second you turn the steering wheel, especially right after starting the car, that points directly to the power steering system. It could be something super simple, like low fluid, or it could be a sign the power steering pump itself is on its way out.
But the belt and its accomplices, well, they aren't always the whole story. Sometimes there are other contributing factors that create the perfect conditions for a crime. A squeal. Now, this might sound a little strange, but a weak battery can actually cause a belt squeal. Here's how it works. Right after you start the car, your alternator has to work overtime to recharge that weak battery. This huge electrical load makes the alternator pulley much harder to turn, which puts a massive strain on the belt and causes it to slip and squeal.
So how do you know if your battery's weak? Well, with the car turned completely off, you can test it with a simple multimeter. A healthy, fully charged battery should read somewhere in this range, between 12.2 and 12.6 volts. If it's any lower than that, you could have a problem.
Now for the other side of that electrical equation. With the engine running, that same multimeter test will show you the alternator's output. What you want to see is a reading somewhere between 13.5 and 14.5 volts. If it's lower, your alternator might be failing, which again puts all that extra strain on the belt. And finally, don't forget about the environment. A little bit of morning dew or moisture from rain can cause a temporary squeal that just goes away as the belt dries off. But more seriously, fluid leaks, like oil or coolant, can get on the belt and cause constant slipping. And of course, in really cold weather, the rubber belt just gets stiff, which reduces its grip until the engine warms everything up.
Okay, we've identified all the suspects. Now it is time to close the case. Here's how you can do a quick and, more importantly, a safe inspection to figure out what's wrong and finally silence that squeal for good.
First, and I absolutely cannot stress this enough, make sure the engine is completely off. Never ever do this with the engine running, okay? Once it's safe, look closely at the belt for those signs of wear we talked about, the cracks, that shiny surface, or any frayed edges. Look around for any drips. Then, just press down firmly on a long, straight section of the belt. It should feel tight, not loose and floppy.
Now, let's say you do that inspection and the belt actually looks pretty good, and it feels nice and tight. Well, your problem is likely a bit deeper. It's probably a failing tensioner or a bad bearing in one of those accessory pulleys. At this point, it's really best to talk to a professional mechanic to get a proper diagnosis.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most crucial piece of advice. You might see these cans of belt dressing spray at the auto parts store promising to stop the squeal. Just avoid them. They are nothing more than a temporary band-aid that masks the real issue. That squeal is a symptom, and fixing the actual underlying cause is the only way to make sure your car stays safe and reliable. So the next time you hear that squeal, what are you going to listen for first?